I went to Florida thinking I was attending a friend's wedding, not uncovering a secret that could shatter every relationship around me. The groom believed he was marrying into a perfect future, oblivious to what his best friend my friend had done behind closed doors. When the truth landed in my hands, it felt less like an accident and more like fate pulling strings. I tried to walk away, but betrayal has a gravity of its own, and silence can be its sharpest weapon. In the end, I didn't confront him. I let the truth walk into the wedding by itself and watched the fallout unfold in quiet, controlled victory. I didn't come to Florida looking for trouble. I came for a wedding. The kind where sunlight hits the ocean like it's been polished. The kind where everyone pretends their life is perfect because someone else's is supposedly about to begin. I was supposed to smile, sip champagne, and watch two people promise each other forever. Simple, predictable, peaceful. But fate rarely respects simplicity. And secrets, they breathe even when you try to suffocate them. My name is Clara. And there's something you should know about me, something most people miss because I don't carry it loudly. I have this strange, quiet intuition for the truth. Not the dramatic kind that detectives brag about, just a subtle, unsettling awareness when something in the room doesn't match the words being spoken. And from the moment I arrived in Florida, something felt wrong. Not with the couple. Not with the venue. Not even with the tension between the family members who pretended to like each other. It was my friend, Daniel. The one person I didn't think I'd have to keep an eye on. I knew Daniel's secret 2 days before the wedding. I didn't ask for it. I didn't search for it. It simply walked up to me calm, quiet, almost grateful to finally be seen, and whispered, "You're going to destroy someone's life with this." And maybe I should have ignored it. Maybe I should have stayed out of it. Maybe I should have let the wedding unfold with its pristine table linens and pre-selected playlists and rented fairy lights. But secrets are like loaded guns. Once you know where they're hidden, you start hearing the ticking. Florida greeted me with thick, salty air and that odd blend of chaos and charm that only beach towns manage to balance. I remember standing on the hotel balcony, staring at the waves rolling in deep, deliberate motions. The ocean has a way of predicting storms long before the sky does. If I had listened, maybe I would have walked away. I hadn't even unpacked when my phone buzzed. "Daniel, you here yet? Need to talk." Not "can't wait to see you." Not "let's grab dinner." Not even a casual "welcome to Florida." Just "need to talk." This was the first crack. We'd been friends for 12 years, long enough to know each other's rhythms. Long enough to recognize when something twitched under the surface. Daniel wasn't nervous about the wedding. He wasn't overwhelmed by responsibilities. What he carried was darker, and I was about to find out what. He showed up at my door 20 minutes later, wearing attention I'd never seen on him. His eyes moved too fast. His hands kept drifting to his pockets as if making sure something was still there. I didn't ask questions. I just watched. He told me he wanted to check in. He told me he wanted to make sure I felt comfortable. He told me he was excited to see me. But his voice trembled on the edges, like a lie trying too hard to sound friendly. People often reveal themselves not in their words but in the way silence clings to them. And his silence was suffocating. I didn't know it yet, but something he said that night would later become the key to everything. The reason I knew exactly when to strike. The reason the wedding didn't end the way he imagined. But we'll get there. The night before the rehearsal dinner, the wedding party gathered at a waterfront restaurant. Warm lights, loud laughter, the scent of seafood drifting in the air. I watched Daniel from across the table. He kept checking his phone. Every few minutes. Like he was waiting for a ghost to message him. When the groom Evan slapped his back and thanked him for being the greatest friend on earth, something flickered across Daniel's face. Not pride, not joy, not even embarrassment. It was fear. Tiny, undeniable, instinctive fear. That was when my heart sank a little. Because fear is rarely baseless. It happened at the end of the night. We were leaving the restaurant when the wind picked up, tossing napkins and receipts across the dock. A slip of paper stuck to my leg. I peeled it off absently, assuming it was trash. But it wasn't. It was a printed screenshot. Of a message. A message from Daniel. To someone I shouldn't have known existed. Short, desperate, unmistakable. "You can't tell him. Not before the wedding. Please." My blood ran cold. Not because of what the message implied, but because someone had printed it. Someone had dropped it. Someone wanted it found. And fate chose me. I didn't know who the message was meant for. I didn't know what Daniel was hiding. I didn't know what he was capable of. But I knew this. Weddings don't collapse because of accidents. They collapse because the truth arrives exactly on time. I barely slept that night. The ocean outside my window breathed in long, steady waves, but my mind refused to mimic its calm. I kept replaying that single printed screenshot, Daniel's desperate plea. You can't tell him. Not before the wedding. Please. It felt wrong just holding it. Like I was interfering with a pressure valve that someone had sealed for a reason. I placed the slip on the bedside table. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted toward it as if waiting for it to move on its own. Secrets have a way of shifting the air around them. And that room felt heavier with every passing hour. Florida sunlight is unforgiving. It pours into the hotel rooms whether you invite it or not. When I woke, it hit the slip of paper first, bright, intrusive, almost accusatory. I reached for it instinctively. Something in me whispered, this is the beginning of something you can't undo. But I already knew that. I showered, dressed, tied my hair back, and stared at myself in the mirror. Not to admire anything, but to study the look in my own eyes. The part of me that wanted to stay out of this was still there, small, cautious, begging for neutrality. But another part, the part that notices cracks no one else does, that part was awake now. And it never sleeps once it's seen a pattern. He found me at breakfast. He always did. The restaurant downstairs was filled with wedding chatter centerpieces, color palettes, rehearsal instructions, extended family politics. But his presence sliced clean through it. He sat across from me, pretending to be calm. But his leg kept bouncing under the table. His fingers drummed the menu. His eyes darted any time someone walked behind him. He wore guilt the way other people wear cologne, strong, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I watched him order a simple omelette with the enthusiasm of someone reciting a hostage script. He asked me how I slept. I told him, fine. The lie tasted thin. When the waiter left, he leaned in, lowering his voice. Clara, if you see anything weird this weekend, just trust me. Don't get involved. That was the moment I knew for sure. He wasn't worried about the wedding. He was worried about himself. And whatever he was hiding had started leaking through the cracks. It wasn't the advice that unsettled me. It was the way he said trust me, like someone terrified of a truth slipping through their fingers. I should have walked away then. But I didn't. And that mistake became my greatest leverage. The wedding venue sat right at the edge of the Atlantic, whitewashed wood. Towering windows, breeze drifting through like a living invitation. Everyone felt so sure this wedding would be perfect. Perfect is always the first lie. The rehearsal coordinator gathered everyone into a circle, instructing, organizing, moving people around like chess pieces. Daniel stood beside the groom, Evan, smiling the smile of a man who has buried something deep. But every time his phone buzzed in his pocket, a shadow ran across his face. Once, twice, a third time, 3 vibrations in the span of 5 minutes. He didn't check it. He couldn't. Not with me watching. I pretended to study the decorations, but I watched him in the reflection of a window, sweat forming at his temple, jaw tight, breath shallow. And something in me whispered, whatever this is, it isn't small. After rehearsal, the wedding party broke into scattered conversations. Laughing, mingling, drinking mimosas like hydration was optional. That's when I heard it. Not an admission, not a confession, just an echo of something wrong. 2 bridesmaids were whispering by a table of bouquets. One said, I'm telling you, he's acting weird. Like he's waiting for something to explode. The other replied, he should be. If she shows up. She. The word hit hard enough to stop my breath. Daniel wasn't afraid of something. He was afraid of someone. I turned, pretending to look at the flowers. They didn't notice me. The first whispered, if she really comes, Evan will lose his mind. The second, not just Evan. The whole wedding party will. There it was. Confirmation. Weighty. Unmistakable. A shadow with a name I didn't know yet, but a presence I could feel. Someone out there held power over Daniel. And Daniel held power over the groom. Which meant, whether I wanted it or not, I was now standing in the middle of a fault line. Later that afternoon, I returned to my room. The cleaning staff had been in fresh linens, folded towels, everything smelling faintly of citrus. But something new sat on my pillow. A photograph. Not placed carelessly, not dropped. Deliberately left. My heart thudded once, sharply. It was a picture of Daniel. Laughing. Arms wrapped around a woman I'd never seen. The date printed at the bottom? 6 months ago. And the most important detail? Daniel was wearing the exact same suit he wore to Evan's bachelor trip, the one where he claimed nothing noteworthy happened. A wedding wasn't just going to break, it was going to shatter. I should have called him. Asked him who she was. Asked him why the photo mattered so much someone needed me to see it. But I didn't. Because fate doesn't hand you puzzle pieces to return them. It hands you pieces to build something with. And I had just been handed the first image of the truth. He knocked on my door an hour later. Harder than usual. Urgent. When I opened the door, his eyes went straight to the bed, straight to the photograph. His entire body froze. His face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He just stared at the photo like it was the beginning of his end. He finally managed. "Where did you get that?" I didn't answer, not verbally. I let the silence hold him by the throat. Silence is sharper than accusations. Silence forces the guilty to reveal more than a confrontation ever could. His shoulders sank. His breath trembled. And for the first time since arriving in Florida, I saw it. Pure, unfiltered dread. He backed away from the photo like it was radioactive. "Clara, listen to me. This isn't what you think. Please don't get involved." Not in this. There it was again. The plea from the message. The begging. Not for understanding. For protection. But I wasn't here to save him. Not anymore. He reached for the photo. And that was his mistake. Not because he touched it, but because of what he muttered under his breath, barely audible but unmistakably real. "If she sent this here, she's serious." There it was. The woman from the photograph. The bridesmaids whispered about. The force behind the printed message. She was real. She was close. And she wanted me to know something Daniel was fighting to bury. He tried to take the photo. I didn't let him. My hand landed on it first. The moment his fingers brushed mine, something shifted between us. His voice dropped, almost a warning. "Clara. Don't do this." I didn't answer. I simply took the photo and slid it into my pocket. And Daniel finally realized something that made his entire posture collapse. I wasn't on his side anymore. Not blindly. Not fully. Not without answers. That was the first moment he feared me. Not because of who I was, but because of what I now carried. A truth with teeth. I walked to the shoreline after he left barefoot. The cool sand grounding me. The waves crashed with slow, deliberate force, washing the tension through my body. I studied the photo under the fading sunlight. The woman in it was beautiful, effortlessly so. But her smile. It held something else. Promise? Threat? Victory? It was impossible to know. But one thing was clear. She knew Daniel well enough to make him unravel. And she wanted me involved. Not Evan. Not the bride. Me. Why? Some truths hunt the person most likely to unveil them. And whether I accepted it or not, that person was me. If you've ever stumbled into someone else's hidden mess by accident or fate, tell me in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe. You'll want to stay with me for what comes next. There's a certain paralysis that comes with knowing too much too fast. A stillness. A tightening beneath the ribs. A quiet awareness that the ground beneath your feet has begun to shift and you didn't give permission for the earthquake. That's what I felt looking at that photograph again later that night. Sitting alone on the hotel balcony. Florida's heat pressed against my skin. But inside, everything felt cold. Cold. And narrowing. The woman in the photo wasn't just a threat to Daniel. She was a message to me. Not a warning. Not an introduction. A message. It meant, "You're in my world now." And I wasn't sure whether she intended me to sink or swim. At 11:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. But the message made my stomach drop so sharply it left a hollow ache behind. Unknown. He won't tell the truth. But you already know that, don't you? A chill ran along my arms. My fingers tightened around the phone. Another buzz. Unknown. Meet me. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. By the pier behind the venue. Come alone. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, not fast but deep, like something waking up inside me. This was her. It had to be. The woman. The ghost from the bridesmaids' whispers. The force behind the printed screenshot. And now, She wanted to meet. I should have said no. I should have told the coordinator. I should have warned the groom. I should have stayed in my lane. But when you've tasted the first drop of truth, you don't step back. You lean in. What I didn't know was that meeting her would be the moment everything twisted. The moment suspicion turned into heartbreak. The moment the real betrayal began. I barely slept. Again. At sunrise, I found myself walking to the hotel coffee bar just to feel some semblance of normalcy. That's where I saw him, Evan. The groom. The man whose world was about to detonate. He stood barefoot, hair tousled from sleep, stirring a cup of coffee with a wooden stick like it was the only steady thing in his life. He saw me and smiled, warm, genuine, the kind of smile Daniel used to give. Before this, he walked over, leaning against the counter. "Big day tomorrow," he said. I nodded. He laughed softly. "You know, I'm not nervous." "Isn't that weird?" I studied him quietly. He wasn't nervous because he trusted the people around him. He believed his best friend would stand by him. He believed his fiancée loved him without shadows. He believed the world was still intact. And the worst part? He deserved to believe it. For one brief moment, I wanted to walk away from everything. Let the truth stay buried. Let the wedding run its course. But fate never asks what you want. It only asks what you're willing to carry. And I was already carrying too much. At exactly 7:58 a.m., I stood at the edge of the wooden pier behind the venue. The ocean below moved in slow, deep breaths. The sky was still washed in pale morning colors as if hesitant to reveal what the day intended. I waited. At 8:06 a.m., she appeared. The woman from the photograph. She didn't approach timidly or apologetically. She moved with purpose, chin lifted, steps sharp against the wood, eyes fixed on me like she had been waiting for this moment longer than I'd been alive. She stopped 10 feet away, close enough to read her expression, far enough to keep secrets between us. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had nothing left to fear. "I needed you to see the truth," she said. She didn't introduce herself, didn't explain the photo, didn't apologize for the shock. Instead, she studied me, head tilted. "You're Clara. Daniel trusts you." The word trusts tasted wrong coming from her lips. I crossed my arms, steadying myself. "Why involve me?" Her mouth tightened, not in anger, but something colder. "Because he listens to you." The wind lifted strands of her hair. She didn't flinch. Didn't break eye contact. "And because the groom deserves to know who he's calling his best friend." The pit in my stomach tightened. "Tell me what happened," I said. She hesitated. Only for a second. Then she stepped closer. "Daniel lied to him. For months." My pulse quickened. "About what?" Her expression darkened. "About me." I wasn't prepared for what she said next. What she confessed reshaped everything I thought I knew about Daniel. Everything I thought I knew about loyalty, friendship, and betrayal. She leaned on the railing beside me, gaze turned toward the water. Her voice softened, not gentle, but exhausted. "I dated him. For almost a year." My heart stilled. A year. 12 months. Long enough for love. Long enough for destruction. My thoughts raced. Daniel never mentioned her. Never hinted at someone serious. Never showed signs of heartbreak. Unless he'd buried it carefully. She continued. "He told me he loved me. He told me we had a future." Her hands tightened on the railing. "And then he went to Evan's bachelor trip, and everything changed." I swallowed hard. "What happened?" She exhaled shakily. Not fragile, frustrated. "He ghosted me." Completely. My chest clenched. "Did something happen at the trip?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Yes. And I have proof." She reached into her bag and handed me another photograph. My breath hitched when I turned it over. It wasn't romantic. Wasn't intimate. Wasn't sexual. It was worse. Daniel. Kissing the bride. Not a friendly kiss. Not a mistaken moment. A kiss full of hunger. Hands gripping her waist. Her fingers tangled in his shirt. And the timestamp? Same night. Same trip. Same suit. My stomach dropped. This was no misunderstanding. This was a betrayal designed with precision. And Daniel had been hiding it for 6 months. For the first time, I felt something break quietly inside me. Not for myself. Not for the woman beside me. Not even for Daniel. But for Evan, the groom. The man who smiled at sunrise, believing his life was untouchable. He trusted Daniel. He loved him like a brother. He believed in the wedding with his entire heart. And this was a knife aimed at his spine. I closed my eyes against the weight of it. The woman spoke softly. He thought I'd stay quiet. Thought I'd disappear. I was never going to tell Evan. But when Daniel pushed me away, something inside me snapped. She turned her gaze on me steady, unwavering. He broke me. So I broke the secret. I should have walked away then. I should have told her I didn't want to be part of this collapse. But the truth has a gravity of its own. And I was already falling. As she prepared to leave, she looked at me one last time. Daniel wants this buried. But you're the only one he can't manipulate. She stepped back onto the pier. So the question is, Clara, what are you going to do with the truth? Morning heat crept into the alleys before anyone else stirred, but Elena was already awake, lying still, replaying the last fragments in her mind like they were warnings she couldn't quite interpret. The house felt too quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum seemed to be holding its breath. She pushed herself up, expecting to find Adrian at his desk or pacing with one of his restless early morning ideas. Instead, she stepped into an emptiness that didn't match the rhythm of their home. The coffee pot was cold. His shoes were missing from the doorway. A drawer in the entryway had been left slightly open. Something was off. She wandered deeper into the house, fingers grazing surfaces as if they could read traces he had left behind. Adrian was unpredictable at times, creative, obsessive, brilliantly scattered, but this wasn't one of his patterns. He always left a note. A text. A signal. The silence felt arranged. When she reached the balcony, the city stretched out under a hazy morning sky, unbothered, unknowing. Her pulse flared. This wasn't ordinary absence. This had weight. Then her phone buzzed. Not a message from Adrian. A notification from the security system she had forgotten existed most days. Front gate accessed at 4:13. Her breath thinned. She replayed the clip. A blurry figure slipped out through the gate, movement quick, deliberate, not panicked, not forced, but not familiar. Adrian wasn't beside the figure. He wasn't anywhere in the frame. A colder tension settled into her bones. She went back inside, checking each room again, slower this time, noticing details she'd brushed past earlier: his laptop missing, his favorite jacket gone, the sketchbook he never traveled without pulled off the shelf and left open on the floor. The sketchbook stopped her. On the page, a rushed graphite smear. A shape she recognized, a place she didn't want to remember. It was tied to something he'd once avoided discussing, something he'd brushed off with a half-truth that had always felt incomplete. Elena knelt, studying the lines. That wasn't an absent-minded doodle. It was a location. A message, a breadcrumb. There were a dozen ways to interpret it, and she knew she had to choose carefully. A wrong assumption could turn a mystery into a disaster. Before she could make sense of the sketch, her phone buzzed again, this time a call. Unknown number. No caller ID. Too perfect in its timing. She stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Let it ring? Answer? Either choice had consequences. She took a breath, steadying herself. The line clicked open. No one spoke. A faint rustle, a distant hum, breathing not hers. And then a voice, low and unhurried. You shouldn't be looking for him. The line died before she could react. Elena stood in the center of the room, the quiet closing in again. Heavier, sharper, edged with something unmistakable. She wasn't imagining the shift in the air. It had already begun. And Adrian was in the middle of something far more dangerous than he had ever admitted. Elena didn't move for nearly a full minute after the call ended. Her mind fought to reorder itself, to reject the implication of those 5 words. But there was no misinterpretation. Whoever spoke knew Adrian was missing. They knew she was already trying to piece things together. And they were confident enough to warn her without disguising the threat. Not a ransom call. Not a plea for secrecy. A warning. She replayed the voice in her head, steady but not monotone, masculine but not deep, as if the speaker had removed every hint of emotion. That control alone made her uneasy. She forced herself to breathe, slow and measured, anchoring her thoughts. This wasn't the moment to panic. Panic blurred details, and details were all she had. The sketchbook still lay open on the floor. She picked it up again, tracing the drawn lines. A narrow footbridge. A slanted warehouse roof. A stretch of cracked pavement leading to an inlet he hadn't visited in years. She remembered being there once a late afternoon that felt haunted even then. Why would he draw that place now? She turned the page. Another sketch. Not a location this time. A person. Half-rendered, the face unfinished, the shoulders angled away. But the silhouette was unmistakable. She had seen that posture before, rigid spine. One shoulder slightly higher than the other, like an old injury had healed wrong. Her stomach tightened. He had drawn this silhouette once, years ago, in a moment of unguarded honesty. He had only given her a name, then nothing more. Nolan. A name Adrian had avoided ever since. She heard another buzz. A message this time. From Adrian's number. But the preview text made her freeze. Stop. Just that. One word. No punctuation. No context. She opened it fully. Don't come after me. Don't call anyone. Don't go to the inlet. Trust me. Stay home. The timestamp hit her harder than the words. 4:16 a.m., 3 minutes after the gate recording. But the tone was wrong. Adrian never used clipped, repetitive instructions. And he never typed like someone erasing panic. She checked the metadata on reflex. The phone had sent the message from a location outside the city. Not where Adrian should have been. Not near the inlet at all. A hollow thud echoed through her chest. Someone else had his phone. Someone who wanted her to feel watched. Someone who wanted to redirect her. She stood pacing as the first crack in her understanding deepened. Adrian wasn't simply missing. He wasn't on a spontaneous retreat or trapped in some misunderstanding. This was deliberate, coordinated, controlled. Her eyes drifted back to the sketchbook and the half-finished figure. If Nolan was involved, then the story Adrian never told her, the one he insisted wasn't relevant anymore, was very much alive. Elena grabbed her jacket, keys and a small portable drive from the desk. She didn't bother packing anything else. She just needed answers, and the first one waited at the inlet. Warning or not, she wasn't staying home. She locked the door behind her, the echo sharp in the morning quiet. As she walked to the car, she noticed something she'd missed earlier, a tire track in the dust near the gate. Unfamiliar tread. Fresh. Someone had been closer than she thought. She slid into the driver's seat, heart steadying into a determined rhythm. If they didn't want her to find him, then she was definitely getting close. The inlet waited, and whatever history Adrian had buried was finally pushing its way back to the surface. I should warn you, this is where everything shifts inside me. Not because of what I discovered, but because of what I finally admitted to myself. I wasn't just searching for answers anymore. I was preparing for the truth to hurt. Florida's early sun had barely lifted when I pulled over near the inlet. The morning haze sat heavy over the water, turning everything into blurred silhouettes. It mirrored exactly how my mind felt, fogged, stretched, too full. I stepped out and walked toward the old pier Adrian once sketched from memory. Boards creaked under me. The smell of salt tangled with diesel fumes from boats I couldn't see. But this place wasn't supposed to matter. Not anymore. Not after everything Adrian said he left behind. And yet, here it was again, pulling me in like a tide I never escaped. I replayed his message in my mind. Don't come after me. Don't go to the inlet. It was almost laughable. Almost. Because if he wrote it, he was scared. And if he didn't, someone wanted me far, far away from the truth. A gull screamed overhead, ripping through the quiet, and something about its sharpness made my chest tighten. The kind of tightness you get when denial finally breaks. I whispered his name once, testing how it felt leaving my mouth now. Adrian. No answer. Just wind. As I walked farther down the pier, I saw it, the place I'd hoped I imagined. A footprint. Two, actually. And one was Adrian's. I knew the odd curve of his left print anywhere. The other? A heavier step, deeper, angled inward like weight was forcing it down. Nolan. I didn't want to admit it. Not yet. Not when I still didn't know what role he played in the past. Adrian never allowed me to understand. But then I saw the scrape along the wood, fresh, sharp-edged. A dragged boot. Or a dragged body. Something twisted low in my stomach. That quiet instinct you can't logic your way out of. This wasn't just a disappearance. It was a pursuit. One that started long before this night. As I moved closer to the end of the pier, I noticed something wedged between two boards. A scrap of black fabric. Clothing Adrian owned, an old hoodie he always claimed he didn't care about but never threw away. I held it between my fingers, feeling the frayed edge. Memory flashed. Him handing it to me after a storm. Him laughing when it swallowed my hands whole. Him saying, "It's just a hoodie, don't turn it into something sentimental." He lied. He always lied when he wanted to sound tough. I felt the first real sting, not of betrayal, but of loss. A cold, gray kind of heartbreak. Because if he'd been here, really here, he didn't leave willingly. My phone buzzed. At first, I didn't want to look. Some instinct whispered that whatever waited on the screen would confirm something I wasn't ready for. But I forced myself. A new message. Same unknown number as before. Stop looking. No greeting. No threat. Just absolute authority. I stared at it, pulse thudding hard enough that the sound filled my ears. Whoever messaged me wasn't panicking. They weren't improvising. They were reminding me that they were close enough to know where I was standing at that exact moment. I turned slowly, eyes scanning the shoreline. Nothing. No movement. No figure hidden behind the mangroves. But the sense of being watched wrapped around me like invisible wire. This was no ordinary warning. It was a promise. I walked back to my car, not rushing, not slowing. Just calculating. Because there was a moment, one sharp, slicing second where something clicked. The message came exactly 23 seconds after I picked up the hoodie scrap. Too fast for coincidence. Too intentional. Whoever sent it had eyes on me. Not from afar. Not digitally. They were physically near. And that meant one thing I had refused to believe until now. This wasn't just about Adrian. This was about me too. As I reached the car and placed my hand on the door handle, something shifted under the tire, something metallic. I crouched. A tracker. Freshly planted. The kind that shuts off its own signal unless triggered. I stood slowly, clutching it in my palm. They wanted to know where I was going. What I was learning. How close I was getting. But they made one mistake. They let me find it. And for the first time since Adrian disappeared, my heartbreak began to harden into something cold, sharp, and utterly unstoppable. You should know something about me. I don't explode when I'm pushed. I don't break. I don't scream. I sharpen. And the moment I found that tracker under my tire, that was the exact second the old version of me died, the one who waited for people to tell the truth willingly. Now, I would take it. I slipped the tracker into my jacket pocket and leaned against the car door, letting the Florida air thicken around me. Everything felt too still. Someone was nearby. Someone who expected me to panic, to flee home, to hide like prey. They didn't know me at all. I took a slow breath, the kind people take before making irreversible decisions. Then I opened my car door without getting in. Let them think I found nothing. Let them think I was predictable. The inlet boards creaked behind me once, faintly. Not the wind, not an animal, a step. I didn't turn. Didn't flinch. Silence can be a weapon if you know how to use it. And I did. I drove home calmly, obeying every speed limit, every turn signal, creating the illusion that their plan was working. But the whole ride, my pulse stayed cold and steady. Because I wasn't going home at all. I circled the neighborhood twice, then parked 4 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance through back streets and alley shadows. Florida humidity clung to me, thick and relentless, but it grounded me. If someone was tailing me, they'd have to step out of hiding to keep up. No one did. Good? It meant they trusted the tracker. And trust is the first crack in any enemy's armor. My front door looked untouched, but I didn't trust the surface. Not now. Not after the inlet. I entered slowly, scanning. Normal. Too normal. The absence of disturbance felt staged. A message in itself. I went upstairs and opened the small lockbox Adrian never cared about. He always joked that I kept memories like evidence. Maybe he didn't know how right he was. Inside were only 3 items. The old photo of him at 19. A folded map he once carried everywhere. And a USB drive he said held nothing important. That last one had always bothered me. Adrian was protective about trivial things, but careless about real vulnerabilities. A contradiction I never fully solved. Tonight I would. I plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained one file. A single audio clip, 23 minutes long. Untitled, unlabeled, hidden behind 2 layers of encryption that Adrian clearly assumed I'd never attempt to break. He underestimated my stubbornness. He always underestimated the quiet things about me. The audio began with background noise, breathing, maybe? A shuffling, then a voice. Not Adrian's. A deeper one. Smooth, unhurried. Polite in a way that felt venomous. Nolan. I knew it instantly. His tone held that signature control. The same restraint I heard in the warning call. I froze, every instinct locking into place as he spoke again. You can walk away from this, Adrian. Just give me what I asked for. Silence from Adrian. Then Nolan's voice sharpened. Or your little Clara finds out what you never intended her to know. My own name. Spoken like leverage. Spoken like threat. The edges of my vision pulsed. Adrian's reply came next, strained, breathy, cracked with fear I had never heard from him before. She's not part of this. Oh, but she is, Nolan answered softly. You tied her to you. You brought her into the world you swore you left. Another pause. Then a slow exhale from Nolan, one that felt almost amused. Do you think she'll forgive you when she finds out what you did? My throat tightened, every nerve in my body stilled. And then Nolan delivered the sentence that changed everything. She'll learn your secret, Adrian. The one you buried in Florida. The one only I helped you clean up. I stared at the screen. Motionless, breathless. Adrian had a secret. A buried one. And Nolan had helped him cover it. So that was the real reason Nolan resurfaced. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't greed. It wasn't unfinished business. It was control. Control over Adrian. Control over me. Control over the narrative. I replayed the last line over and over, letting the words settle into place, cold, precise, final. Whatever Adrian hid. Whatever he did. It wasn't something Nolan wanted exposed. It was something he wanted weaponized. Against both of us. And that meant I had leverage too. Because if Nolan was desperate to keep something buried, then digging it up was my ticket out of fear and into power. I sat back slowly, my heartbeat steadied, my mind aligned, and for the first time since Adrian vanished, I felt something sharp and dangerous bloom inside me. Purpose. The audio file ended abruptly. But before the silence settled, a final noise slipped through unnoticed the first time. A door, opening, then closing, and a voice barely audible but not Nolan's. Adrian's. And he whispered something I couldn't make out. So I increased the volume, isolated the frequency, enhanced the waveform, and when the sound cleared, my stomach turned to ice. Because Adrian whispered, Clara, run. Adrian's whisper, weak, terrified, urgent, kept replaying in my head like a broken loop. Clara, run. Run from who? Run from Nolan? Run from the truth? Run from him? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't running. Running is for prey. And I was done being hunted. This is where I stop reacting and start moving pieces. I copied the audio file onto 3 separate drives and stored them in 3 different places in the house. Not because I feared losing the content, but because I needed time to think, time to choose the next step. And then I did the one thing Nolan would never expect. I turned the tracker back on. Not on my car. On my neighbor's car. She left for work at 6:30 every morning, like clockwork. Nolan or whoever was monitoring me would follow the tracker, thinking I was the one leaving the neighborhood. A misdirection, small, surgical, perfect. I needed him distracted. I needed him confident. I needed him off my scent long enough to pull apart the truth Adrian spent years burying. I opened the old map Adrian kept in the lockbox. I'd seen it before, but never understood why he kept an outdated map of Florida's coastal sectors from nearly a decade earlier. Faded pen marks dotted seemingly random areas, but now after the audio, they weren't random at all. A faint red X near the inlet. Another by an abandoned citrus plant. A third off a rural road heading toward an old fishing community. 3 places. 3 secrets? Or 1 secret spread across 3 locations. Either way, the map wasn't a relic of his past. It was a ledger, a record, a confession drawn in topography. And I needed to know what those marks meant. I traced the inlet X with my finger. It aligned with the exact spot Adrian's hoodie scrap was found wedged between the boards. My breath thinned. Whatever happened that night, whatever Adrian ran from back then, it started here, at the inlet. And Nolan knew. Nolan always knew. I needed information. Quietly, without alerting anyone. So I did something simple. Almost too simple. I drove to a coffee shop, one that didn't have cameras, and parked 2 blocks away. I entered with a hoodie up, phone off, the USB drive in my pocket. I pulled out my laptop. Opened a background-level forensic program Adrian once taught me to use just for fun. Nothing about that memory felt fun now. I analyzed the audio file again, this time focusing on the background, not the voices. Water dripping, concrete echo, a faint metallic clang. Then, a boat engine starting. One I recognized. Adrian's father used to repair boats in Tampa before they moved. I knew the sound of those engines better than I wanted to. And the metal echo? Not a warehouse. Not a basement. A marina. Not public. Not fancy. A private, almost forgotten dockyard near the citrus plant he marked on the map. Pieces began rearranging themselves inside my mind with terrifying precision. Adrian wasn't taken randomly. He wasn't grabbed in the dark. He was taken somewhere he'd been before. Somewhere tied to his past. Somewhere Nolan had access to. That marina. It was the second X. A quiet certainty settled in me. I wasn't chasing a disappearance anymore. I was chasing a cover-up. And if Nolan wanted the past hidden, then the past was exactly where I needed to go. But first, I had to test something. I sent a single message from a burner app to the unknown number, the one that sent me threats. Just 2 words. I know. My thumb hovered for a second over the send button. Then I tapped it. Message sent. Delivered. No response. Not for 1 minute. Not for 5. Not for 10. And then, stop. Same word as before. Same tone. But there was a difference now. Desperation. Small, subtle, but undeniable. Nolan wasn't warning me anymore. He was afraid of what I'd already found. He thought I was closer than I actually was. And that shifted the sudden panic in a man who had all the control before. That was my first victory. Not loud. Not dramatic. Quiet. Calculated. Perfect. I looked at the map again. 3 X's. I already visited one. The second, the citrus plant, stood 30 minutes away. Rotting. Decommissioned. Forgotten. If Adrian left anything behind. If Nolan tied him to any mistake. If their past hinged on something dangerous. It would be there. I closed my laptop, tucked the USB back into my pocket, and walked out of the shop without looking back. This was the moment my investigation stopped being reactive. This was where I started hunting. I reached my car, opened the driver door, and froze. Because sitting on the seat, clean, folded, placed with surgical precision, was a photograph of Adrian, standing beside a man whose face I fully recognized, whose posture I could never mistake. Nolan. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the date handwritten at the bottom. 3 weeks ago. Adrian lied. His past didn't return. He returned to it. The photograph lay on my car seat like a confession Adrian never intended to give. 3 weeks ago. Not years. Not some distant past. 3 weeks. That meant everything I believed about his old life, his dangerous friend, his buried secret. It wasn't buried. It wasn't old. It wasn't gone. It was alive. Current. Active. And Adrian had stepped right back into it long before disappearing. This was the first moment I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. A cold, surgical clarity. Because if Adrian met Nolan willingly 3 weeks ago, then one of them was lying. Maybe both. And I was done giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. Standing in the parking lot with the Florida heat pushing down on me, I understood something with calm finality. Someone left this photo for me intentionally. Someone wanted me to know Adrian wasn't innocent. And someone believed that knowledge would break me. But heartbreak had already burned away. Fear had already dissolved. Now only strategy remained. So I didn't react. Not visibly. Not emotionally. I placed the photograph back on the seat with 2 fingers avoiding prints and closed the car door without taking it. Let them watch me walk away empty-handed. Let them think I missed it. Let them underestimate me again. I'd spent my whole life being the quiet one. The careful one. The polite, predictable one. But quiet doesn't mean weak. It means observant. And people forget. Observers see everything first. I didn't drive to the citrus plant. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a place Nolan would never expect. The wedding venue. Yes, the wedding he was supposed to attend next week. The one Adrian swore he couldn't stand. The one filled with friends Adrian never wanted to be around again. Except if that photograph was real. He was around them again. And recently, the venue sat near the coast, all glass arches and artificial landscapes. Perfect for social media photos and perfect for watching someone without being noticed. I parked far away, walked the rest of the distance, blended in with the vendors prepping for the final walkthrough. Nobody questioned me. Nobody looked twice. People rarely see women who move with calm purpose. They assume we belong, and that assumption became my cover. The reception hall was open, half-decorated. Long tables, crystal centerpieces, soft white lights. But I wasn't looking at any of that. I was looking at the walls. More specifically, at the photographs of the wedding party displayed for guests to admire. Faces, names, connections, and then, there he was, Nolan. Dead center in the group shot. Arm around the groom. Smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't just attending. He was a best man. A core member of their inner circle. My pulse didn't rise. My breath didn't quicken. But something behind my ribs shifted. Because Adrian always insisted that the group around Nolan was toxic, dangerous, the reason he left Florida. But this photo? This shot of the wedding party? They looked comfortable together. Years deep comfortable. Meaning Adrian's story wasn't just bent. It was fractured. And I wasn't even at the twist yet. I approached a group of vendors setting up floral arrangements. One woman mid-30s, sharp eyes softened by a warm smile, looked like the type who saw everything. Perfect. I asked casually, politely. The way women talk to each other when they want information without revealing intent. Oh, is everyone arriving today? I heard the best man is somewhat of a celebrity among the group. She chuckled. Nolan? Oh yeah, he's kind of the glue around here. Everyone trusts him. My stomach cooled. Glue. Trust. She kept talking. He handles things nobody else wants to deal with. Problems, drama, trouble, he fixes it. Fixes it. The exact phrase Adrian once used when talking about the night he met Nolan. Only now it was said casually. Admiringly. As if Nolan ran cleanup for them like a professional. So he's close to the groom? I asked lightly. Oh honey. He's close to all of them. I nodded. Smiled. Thanked her. But inside? Inside something icy locked into place. Because if Nolan was the fixer of the group, then what, exactly, did he fix for Adrian? And why did Adrian spend years pretending the group didn't exist? Unless the secret Nolan held wasn't just about Adrian. It was about all of them. I slipped into the venue's hallway and sent a message to the unknown number again. This time just one question. Did he tell them? I waited. Slowly. Patiently. 5 minutes. 10. Then the response came. Not cold. Not commanding. For the first time. Hesitant. No. I stared at the single word. Then I typed. What happens if they find out? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then a single reply. Don't. Just that. Not stop. Not stay away. Just don't. A plea. Not a command. That shift told me everything. Nolan wasn't afraid of me exposing Adrian. He was afraid the wedding group would learn something they weren't supposed to know. Which meant the secret wasn't just Adrian's. It belonged to them too. And if the secret threatened the whole circle, then I was holding the thread that could unravel their entire world. I left the venue and walked toward the parking lot behind the catering trucks. My shoes crunched on gravel. The air smelled like salt mixed with lemon cleaner. As I turned the corner, I saw a shadow move. Someone stepped out from behind a large van. A man. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Not Nolan. Someone younger. He looked at me with a jolt of recognition, then panic. He turned to leave, fast. Too fast. I called out, not loudly, not desperately. Just enough. Does he know I'm here? He stopped mid-step. Didn't turn. Didn't speak. Just froze. A full second. 2, 3. Then he walked away without answering. Which was an answer. Someone had been sent here. To watch me. To follow me. To confirm what I was digging into. I wasn't just in the orbit of danger anymore. I was inside the perimeter. Exactly where I needed to be. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. A new message, not from the unknown number. From Adrian's phone. One sentence. If you go to the citrus plant, you won't come back. But here's the thing. I never said I was going there. And nobody saw the map in my house. Which means only one truth was possible. Someone was inside my home after I left. And they knew exactly which ex I was heading for next. Night had settled over the quiet edges of the city long before I reached the hiding place. The air tasted metallic, charged with the same tension that had been stalking me ever since the trap at the villa. Every streetlight felt like an eye. Every window felt like it was holding its breath. I didn't stop. Not until I reached the forgotten greenhouse tucked behind rows of abandoned townhomes, the place where I and Adrian once met in secret before either of them understood the scale of the danger surrounding them. The glass panes were cracked, ivy strangling the metal frame, but soft gold light leaked from inside. I slipped in. Adrian was already there, pacing like a man trying not to drown. One look at his face said everything. The information he'd uncovered wasn't just bad, it was destabilizing. "You're late," he murmured, but his voice carried no accusation, only fear. "I was being followed," I said. "I had to lose them." His shoulders tensed. "That means they've escalated." "They already have," I countered. "Show me what you found." He pulled a folder from under a broken planter and laid it out on the dusty table. I leaned in and the pieces I'd gathered over the past weeks began to click into place with terrifying precision. "I cross-checked the contracts," Adrian said. "The offshore transfers, the shell companies, it all loops back to one entity, Vanguard Meridian. And that company? It's not real. It's a front created by someone with access to federal archives, someone who can erase their own tracks." My breath stilled. He pushed the last page toward me. "This signature is the link. Whoever forged it slipped once. Once. But that's all we needed." I stared at the photocopy. The elegant, looping initials were familiar, absurdly familiar. Not Leon's. Not his mother's. Not the board's. It belonged to someone whose presence had always been felt but never seen. Someone who occupied that eerie space between rumor and shadow. "Adrian," I whispered. "This is impossible." "No." He shook his head. "This is orchestrated. From the beginning. The disappearances. The failed takeover. Your surveillance. Leon's behavior. All of it." A heavy silence settled between us, one that carried not just fear, but dawning understanding. The mastermind behind the Empire's darkest operations wasn't the man I'd confronted. It wasn't the rivals I'd been warned about. It was the person who controlled them all. A new sound broke the hush. A soft click. Two beams of red light slid across the greenhouse floor, converging, then rising slowly until they rested on Adrian's chest. Snipers. My pulse slammed against my ribs. Adrian down. I lunged for him as the first shot shattered a glass pane, sending shards exploding like ice. He grabbed my arm, pulling me behind a stone trough as another bullet tore through the opposite wall. "They found us," he hissed. "Not they. Him. The ghost behind Vanguard Meridian. The architect of the Empire's corruption. The one who had just sent a death sentence to silence their discovery." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, whether a rescue or a threat. I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Everything that came before was only the surface. The true game had just begun. "We run on my count," I said. "Because if we stay, we die." And outside, the snipers adjusted for their next shot. The greenhouse smelled like rain on hot metal. Shattered glass glittered across the floor like fragments of a shattered calm. And the first adrenaline strike hit my chest hard. Fear had a new shape now. Precise, usable, something I could channel rather than succumb to. I crouched behind a rusted trough, Adrian pressed close. And the sound of snipers adjusting their aim was a reminder that hesitation was a luxury I didn't have. "This way," I whispered, my voice cutting the tension like a scalpel. I gestured to a side door half hidden by overgrown vines. Adrian nodded, silent, and together they edged toward the exit. Each step calculated, each sound minimized. The door groaned, a loud note of warning that could have betrayed them, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I dropped my weight, spinning the latch back slowly while scanning the perimeter for movement. A shadow shifted, not a sniper but a lookout. A guard positioned to report any movement inside. I froze. Heart steady, mind razor sharp. The guard stepped closer, whistle half formed. Timing became everything. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small object, a flash device Adrian had jokingly called my little distraction. I pressed it, and a sharp pulse of light erupted, momentarily blinding the figure. They moved. Quiet, precise, toward a back alley I had scouted weeks ago while pretending to survey the wedding venue. My pulse hummed with cold exhilaration. This wasn't just survival. This was the first strike. Once in the alley, I checked the tracker in my hand. Not me. Not Adrian's. Someone had been monitoring every step, but now they were blind. I smiled faintly. Misleading an enemy was an art. I just painted a masterpiece. Adrian leaned against a brick wall, trying to catch his breath. How did you know? I didn't, I said simply. I planned. You were never in control. You never were. His eyes widened, a mix of awe and fear. Clara, this is bigger than anything I've seen. And it's about to get bigger, I replied. By the time they reached my car, I had already made the first move in a strategy Nolan or the true orchestrator wouldn't anticipate. A secondary burner phone activated, pinging false locations across the city. Every step they had tracked me before would now lead nowhere. I drove without speaking, letting the road guide them into the early shadows of Florida's outskirts. Each mile pushed them closer to my planned target, the citrus plant marked as the second X on Adrian's map, because if they wanted secrets they would find them, and I was going to make sure the secrets were revealed on my terms. The citrus plant came into view, abandoned, rusted machinery and half-collapsed greenhouses casting long shadows. I parked at the edge of the property and slipped out, backpack light, heart steady. I scanned the broken structures, noting every potential hiding spot, every vantage point for observation. And then I found it, a single piece of paper pinned to a rotting beam. A photograph. Adrian. Smiling. With Nolan. Holding something small, metallic, handwritten at the bottom. Find this, and you die. My lips curved faintly. Then I thought, they underestimated me again. And that would be their final mistake. The air inside the abandoned citrus plant felt thick, almost syrupy, as if time itself had slowed to watch what I would do next. The ground was littered with dried orange peels, broken crates, and rust that crumbled under my boots like old lies turning to dust. I held the photograph between my fingers, letting the edges bite into my skin. Someone wanted this to shake me. Someone wanted this to stop me. Someone still believed I was playing catch-up. They were wrong. I was already several steps ahead. I tucked the photo into my jacket and walked deeper into the plant. The silence here was different, coiled, waiting. I knew the layout from an old zoning scan I'd studied weeks ago, back when this wedding conspiracy was still just a faint outline in my mind. Adrian followed several steps behind, his shoes crunching on dried leaves. He was tense. He had every right to be. The moment he saw the photograph in my hand, his breathing shifted. Sharper, guilty adjacent. He wasn't my enemy. But he wasn't innocent either. Not anymore. When we reached the inner processing chamber, sunlight cut through holes in the roof. A strange glow spilled onto the old conveyor belts like a spotlight waiting for a confession. That's when I saw it. A message sprayed in red along the wall. Stop digging. Remember what you owe. Adrian stiffened. My pulse didn't. Some debts, after all, were better repaid in silence and strategy. I stepped closer to the painted threat. The red paint was fresh days old at most. It dripped in slow streaks, like a stalled countdown. Someone had been here recently. Watching. Preparing. Then my phone buzzed. Not my main phone. The decoy. It vibrated once, then stopped. A single text flashed on the screen. You're late. He already knows. There it was. The next falling domino. The moment where everything I did from here on out would echo in every direction, past, present, future. He? Adrian whispered behind me. But I didn't turn. Not yet. Not until I felt the shape of my answer. Nolan. I said quietly. Or the one above him. Whoever left that message wants me to believe I've lost control. And have you? I finally turned to him. No. But they have. I took out my black notebook, my real one, the one with no digital trail and no copies. Inside it were dates, cross-references, financial trails, and every inconsistency Nolan thought he'd buried. I flipped to the page marked with a simple star. Adrian watched with growing unease. What are you about to do? Set off the part they never planned for. I snapped a photo of the red message on the wall, then the warning text. And then I sent all of it to a secure vault server connected to a timed release. If anything happened to me now, everything would go public. Weddings don't survive scandals the size of detonations. A slow breath eased from my lungs. Control was no longer a question. It was a guarantee. But the plant wasn't empty. I felt it before I saw it, the shift in air, the faint scrape of a boot. I lifted my hand, signaling Adrian to stay still. My heartbeat didn't spike, it narrowed. From the shadows near the old juice tanks, a figure stepped forward. Not Nolan, not a guard. A woman, tall, controlled. Eyes sharp enough to read the inside of a person. And in her hand, my brother's wristwatch. My breath stilled for the first time in hours. "Why do you have that?" She didn't answer. She just held up a second object. A USB drive wrapped in a ribbon from the wedding decor. Then she dropped it at my feet. The symbolism was precise. Too precise. "Clara," she said, her voice cool and measured. "He's always been 2 steps ahead of you. And he wanted you to find this. The watch. The USB. The timing. The message. This wasn't a threat. This was a move. A calculated escalation." She stepped back, fading into shadow as quietly as she'd arrived. And with her disappearance, the next domino fell, louder than the first. I stared at the USB drive lying on the dusty floor. Adrian whispered my name, fear threading his tone. But I didn't reach for it. Not yet, because the ribbon wrapped around it the exact same pattern used for Nolan's wedding invitations wasn't decorative. It was coded. A warning in symbols only someone who'd studied Nolan's hidden systems could decode. My stomach tightened. The last symbol on the ribbon wasn't part of the wedding design. It was the symbol Nolan used to tag people he intended to ruin next. And it was my symbol. The USB sat at my feet like a challenge. Its ribbon, the twisted echo of Nolan's control, whispered threats only I could read. But it wasn't fear that filled me. It was fury. Quiet, precise, deliberate fury, the kind that builds when someone thinks they can manipulate everything and everyone without consequence. Adrian was frozen, staring at me like he'd finally realized the magnitude of what he'd dragged himself into. He hadn't lied to me about everything, but he'd omitted enough to make me vulnerable. Enough to make me dangerous. I kicked the drive lightly, sending it skidding across the dusty floor. "You taught me too well," I said, voice low but cutting, "to know when someone is afraid of me. And when they're afraid of losing control." I left Adrian in the safety of the citrus plant's far end. Not that I trusted him completely, but he needed to know I was taking the next step. Outside, the Florida wind cut through the rusted metal structures, carrying the faint scent of salt and decay. I pulled my phone from my pocket, ignoring all incoming signals except the secure burner I had activated weeks ago. I traced Nolan's network, every clue, every breadcrumb he left. Payment logs, messages, hidden cameras. A list of contacts and intermediaries so long it made my head spin, but not in fear. In calculation. By the time I mapped out the full extent of his control, I could see it like a machine, cold, precise, and fragile. All I had to do was remove the keystone. And tonight, I intended to do exactly that. I returned to the first location where I'd intercepted a trace of Nolan's presence, the private marina near the citrus plant. The moonlight reflected off the water, jagged like broken glass. Docked boats creaked, chains rattled. I didn't announce myself. I didn't need to. Nolan was already waiting. Calm, composed. The kind of calm that fools people into thinking you're untouchable. "Clara," he said, voice smooth. Controlled. Slightly amused. "I wondered when you'd arrive." I didn't answer. I just stepped closer. Each step measured, silent, deliberate. The tension between us coiled tight. He had power, resources, reach, but I had one advantage he hadn't anticipated. I had the truth. He smiled thinly, stepping onto the dock. "You don't know what you're playing with." "Oh, I think I do," I said, voice cold, measured. "And I also know exactly what happens when someone underestimates me." He leaned back slightly, calculating, and the first cracks began to show. Subtle at first, his fingers fidgeting, his jaw tightening, his eyes darting slightly instead of holding their usual composure. "You've learned fast," he said. "But knowledge isn't power." I smiled faintly. "Oh, it is. Especially when it's knowledge you thought you controlled. You've hidden everything for so long, Nolan. You forgot the one thing about people like me. We notice the patterns, the silence, the omissions. And then we use them." He faltered, stepping closer to the edge of the dock, as if the water itself could swallow him if he leaned too far. I pulled the USB from my jacket. "This," I said, "is the start of undoing everything you've tried to control." Nolan's eyes flicked to it, sharp and cold, but he didn't move. "Not yet." "You really think a little file can ruin me?" he asked, voice tight now. For the first time his confidence cracked. "I don't think," I said. "I know." I set the USB down carefully on the dock between us. It wasn't just a drive. It was leverage, truth, and inevitability rolled into one. And in that moment, I saw him, the man who had always been untouchable, begin to crumble. Not with yelling, not with chaos, but with realization. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I simply stated, "The wedding, your friends, your empire, all of it, depends on the secrets you've buried. And tonight, those secrets are mine." He blinked. That blink lasted long enough for me to notice how truly off balance he was. He realized, finally, that the game had shifted. That control had left his hands. That everything he built to manipulate, dominate, and intimidate now depended on my choices. The dock creaked under our combined weight, a slow, ominous prelude to the consequences that would follow. A single text buzzed on my secure burner. Not from Adrian, not from Nolan. "We see you." The screen went black immediately after, leaving only the chilling echo of the message in the humid night air. I smiled faintly, almost amused. Good. Then they'll see everything next. And with that, the first true domino had been toppled. The moon hung low over Florida's coast, smeared across the horizon like spilled silver. The dock was silent now. But silence was no longer neutral, it was a weapon, a prelude, a stage set for what was coming. Nolan's facade of control had shattered. I could see it in the sharpness of his eyes, the way his posture wavered slightly as he realized how much he'd underestimated me. I'd watched men like him before, the kind who think fear is obedience, but tonight fear would serve me. I didn't approach him. Not yet. I let him stew, trapped in the gravity of the revelation he couldn't undo. Then, my phone buzzed again. A video this time, from Adrian. Hand trembling for only a second before I caught control. I hit play. He appeared on screen, bound, bruised, but alive. His eyes met mine with urgency I couldn't ignore. "Clara, they've been lying to you. Not everything is Nolan's doing. There's someone, above him. Someone orchestrating everything you think you're fixing. Don't trust the wedding. Don't trust the circle." My pulse hit a steady rhythm. This changed everything. Not the leverage I'd gained, but the battlefield itself. Nolan wasn't the true mastermind. He was a gatekeeper, a guardian, a pawn. And if I wanted to finish this, I had to find the player pulling the strings from above. I stood on the edge of the dock, the USB in my hand, knowing exactly how to use it. Nolan leaned forward, trying to recover control, but I anticipated every shift, every syllable. "You think this gives you leverage?" He spat. "You don't even know the whole board." "I know enough," I said calmly. "Enough to expose you, enough to free Adrian, enough to make sure everyone who trusted you suffers the consequences of their ignorance." He stepped closer. His presence was imposing, threatening, but I felt untouchable. Not because I had nothing to lose, but because I had already planned everything. "I've watched you hide. I've traced every lie, every half-truth, every omission. And tonight," my voice dropped to a whisper, icy and controlled, "tonight, the board collapses. And you? You're just the first to fall." Nolan's jaw tightened. The red flash of anger flickered in his eyes, but he understood he'd lost. Not to brute force, not to luck, but to precision, patience, and inevitability. I placed the USB on the dock. My phone pinged with the timed release I'd set weeks ago. Messages, files, evidence, all streaming to secure servers, encrypted but unstoppable, set to reach key people who had been kept in the dark about Nolan's manipulations. The first alerts lit up my screen: wedding organizers, investors, Adrian's friends, and media channels I'd quietly seeded over the past month. Nolan's hand twitched. He realized the network he controlled so carefully was now dismantled one ripple at a time. Then, I reached into my backpack. Another USB. One Adrian had given me weeks ago. The one containing the truth Nolan had kept from all of them. I pressed play. Live feeds began streaming, exposing meetings, transactions, and conversations that no one could deny. Everything collapsed simultaneously, the carefully constructed world of manipulation, control, and fear. I understood one final, terrifying truth. The true mastermind, the one orchestrating everything behind Nolan, had never counted on one thing: my patience. Every misstep, every half-truth, Every planted message had been accounted for. But they had not accounted for me. Because I didn't just react. I predicted. I calculated. I waited. And the fallout would consume them all before they even realized who was orchestrating the endgame. Tonight power wasn't taken, it was quietly claimed. The dock was empty, save for me, the USBs, and the echo of chaos I'd unleashed. Then, a faint sound behind me, a step, deliberate and familiar. I didn't turn. I whispered, "I know you." And the person froze in place. The final move hadn't been made yet. The chaos had begun, but I wasn't part of it, not in the way Nolan or anyone else expected. I watched from the periphery, a quiet observer as the consequences of years of lies, manipulation, and hidden secrets began to unfold. The wedding, the corporate circles, the friends who thought themselves untouchable, they were all scrambling to fill the cracks I had exposed. Adrian was safe. At least for now. He had shaken hands with the truth, and he was learning to survive in the wake of his own mistakes. But the real victory wasn't saving him, it was reclaiming my own agency. Every lie they thought they controlled about me, every attempt to manipulate or frighten, it was gone, replaced by something far more potent, certainty. I returned to the villa near the marina. The same place I had first intercepted the trail of Nolan's control. The sun rose slowly over the water, spilling gold across the glass of abandoned boats. Everything seemed unchanged at first glance, but beneath the calm, the world had shifted. Emails, messages, evidence, whispers, they were all moving. In the next hours, minutes, days, people would realize the scope of what I had uncovered, and by then I would be untouchable, not because of fear, but because of knowledge. I sat down on the edge of the dock, my legs dangling over the water. The reflection of the sunrise fractured across the ripples like light through broken glass. I closed my eyes, listening to the quiet, the aftermath, the first breaths of freedom I had carved from years of manipulation and deceit. The USBs had done more than reveal secrets, they had shifted the balance entirely. Contacts I didn't know I had reached out, implicitly understanding the shift in authority. Trusted intermediaries started to respect my calculated silence. Enemies began to hesitate, unsure if they were stepping into a trap or stepping away from it too late. Power, I realized, wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, meticulous, patient, and terrifyingly effective when wielded without haste. I began to plan the next phase. There were still loose ends: Adrian's past, Nolan's remaining network, and the true mastermind pulling strings above it all. But I didn't rush. Each move had to be precise, calculated, measured, and for the first time in years, I was entirely free of fear. I pulled out the photograph that had started all of this, the one of Adrian with Nolan, dated 3 weeks prior. I stared at it, and instead of anger, instead of betrayal, I felt clarity. Every choice I had made, every calculated risk, every silent observation had led me to this point. I tucked it into my journal, next to the notes I had kept throughout the entire ordeal. Not for leverage, not for revenge, for memory, for proof that the quiet, calculated power of patience and observation could rewrite the rules entirely. A text buzzed on my secure burner. Just one line, from an unknown number. "This isn't over." I smiled faintly. No. It isn't. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The Florida coastline stretched before me, calm and golden in the late afternoon sun. The chaos I had unleashed was no longer my burden, it belonged to those who had created it, to the manipulators and liars whose world I had quietly dismantled. I stood on the edge of the marina, feet brushing the ripples of the water, and let the wind carry away the weight I had carried for months. Adrian was safe, yes, but more importantly, I was safe, and stronger than I had ever been. Fear no longer dictated my movements. Anger no longer clouded my judgment. Every decision I made from now on would be mine alone. I thought back to the first moments of discovery, the photograph, the whispered warnings, the tangled web of secrets. Every choice I had made since then, every risk I had taken, was guided by one simple principle: observation is power, patience is leverage, and silence can be the deadliest weapon of all. The people who tried to control me, who underestimated me, who believed fear could bend me, they had failed. And they had failed not because of brute force, but because I had refused to be predictable, refused to be reactionary. I had waited. I had planned, and now I had acted. Some might call what I did revenge, others might call it justice. But it wasn't either, really. Revenge requires heat, anger, chaos. Justice demands institutions, laws, and fairness. What I wielded was something quieter, sharper, and entirely mine. I had reclaimed agency. I had uncovered truth. I had exposed deception, and in the stillness of that Florida afternoon, I realized the deepest power lies not in punishing others but in knowing you can survive, act, and rise above no matter the web around you. I tucked the final USBs into my bag. The evidence I had collected over months now secured. Adrian would go on to live his life, and the circles that had controlled and manipulated him would unravel in silence, one piece at a time. I didn't celebrate. I didn't shout. I simply watched the waves lap against the docks, each ripple a reminder of what I had learned. Patience is strength, observation is strategy, and timing is everything. I'm free. And with that, the past, its secrets, betrayals, and manipulations was no longer my prison. It was my lesson. My weapon. And ultimately, my quiet victory.